1970 wasn't just another year in music history. It was the moment the 60s dream ended and the 70s began with a roar. The counterculture was fractured, the Vietnam War raged on, and some of rock's brightest lights were about to flicker out. The Beatles said goodbye, Hendrix played his final notes, Janis Joplin's voice was silenced forever. Yet out of this sense of loss came reinvention. A new sound emerged. Heavier, louder, more daring, more personal. Rock wasn't dying in 1970, it was being reborn. And that's what we do here. We don't just revisit songs, we uncover the stories, the turning points, and the hidden moments that shaped rock history. In this episode, we'll take you through 15 tracks from 1970 that didn't just climb the charts, they rewrote the future of rock.
Bro.
Number 1, Let It Be, The Beatles. When Paul McCartney first sat at the piano and played Let It Be, it sounded like a hymn, a plea for comfort in a world that was spinning apart. By the time it was released in 1970, it became the swan song of the greatest band in history. The Beatles were breaking up, their unity dissolved by personal tensions, creative differences, and exhaustion. But with Let It Be, they gave the world one last timeless gift. The lyrics came to McCartney in a dream, where he was visited by his late mother, Mary. Her message was simple: it will be all right. Just let it be. With its gospel-inspired piano chords and soulful solo by George Harrison, the song radiated calm amidst chaos. It wasn't just a Beatles song, it felt like a prayer for an uncertain world. When the single dropped in March 1970, fans didn't know it would be the last time they'd hear a new Beatles anthem. Just weeks later, Paul announced his departure, and the dream was over. Let It Be became not just a song, but a farewell to an era, the perfect curtain call to the greatest story in rock. Number 2, Paranoid, Black Sabbath. If the Beatles were saying goodbye, another band was saying hello in the most thunderous way possible. Black Sabbath, a group from Birmingham, England, had already shocked listeners with their debut album, but in 1970 they released Paranoid, and with it, they invented heavy metal. The title track wasn't even planned. The band needed one more song to fill out the record, so Tony Iommi cranked out a riff, Geezer Butler scribbled lyrics about depression and anxiety, and Ozzy Osbourne howled them into the mic. Recorded in just 20 minutes, Paranoid became their signature song and a worldwide hit. With its relentless guitar riff, pounding drums, and eerie vocals, Paranoid gave voice to a generation caught in the paranoia of Cold War fears and Vietnam unrest. Critics dismissed Sabbath at the time as too dark, too heavy, but kids couldn't get enough. It was a revolution. Heavy metal had arrived, and it would never leave. Number 3, American Woman, The Guess Who. Sometimes history is made by accident. During a concert in Ontario, guitarist Randy Bachman broke a string and started riffing while the band killed time. Burton Cummings improvised lyrics, and the crowd went wild. That jam became American Woman. Released in 1970, the song was raw, bluesy, and unforgettable. Its lyrics were a mix of sexual swagger and political undertones, warning against America's influence and the Vietnam War. Some thought it was anti-American. Others just thought it was a great rock song. Either way, it topped the US charts, making the Guess Who the first Canadian band to hit number 1 in America. With its gritty riff and Cummings' wailing vocal, American Woman captured both rebellion and desire. Decades later, Lenny Kravitz would revive it, but nothing matches the original's primal power. It was proof that sometimes a broken string can change music history. Number 4, Lola, The Kinks. Leave it to the Kinks to stir up controversy with charm. Lola, released in 1970, told the story of a romantic encounter between a young man and someone who walked like a woman but talked like a man. At a time when gender and sexuality were taboo topics in mainstream music, the Kinks wrapped the subject in a playful, catchy pop rock package. Ray Davies' witty lyrics and Dave Davies' jangling guitar riff turned what could have been a scandal into a sing-along. Despite radio censors trying to block it, Lola became a worldwide hit. The BBC even forced the band to re-record a line, not because of the sexual content, but because Davies mentioned Coca-Cola, a violation of advertising rules. So they swapped it for Cherry Cola, and the song was saved. Half cheeky joke, half revolutionary statement, Lola pushed boundaries while keeping the dance floor packed. It proved rock could be daring without losing its sense of fun. Number 5. Immigrant Song, Led Zeppelin. Few songs pack as much punch in just over 2 minutes as Led Zeppelin's Immigrant Song. Released in late 1970 on Led Zeppelin III, it opens with Robert Plant's Banshee Wail, a cry that sounds like a Viking battle horn. Jimmy Page's riff crashes in like thunder, and John Bonham's drumming feels like an army marching into war. Inspired by the band's tour of Iceland, Plant wrote lyrics steeped in Norse mythology. Valhalla, I am coming. It wasn't just a rock song, it was a declaration of power. Short, sharp, and brutal, Immigrant Song became one of Zeppelin's most iconic tracks. Though Zeppelin would go on to create longer, more complex songs, Immigrant Song distilled their essence: raw power, mythic themes, and unstoppable energy. Decades later, it still shakes stadiums and soundtracks epic movie battles. In 1970, it was a reminder that Zeppelin wasn't just a band, they were a force of nature.
But I always thought that I'd see you again.
Number 6. Fire and Rain, James Taylor. Amid the noise of hard rock and heavy metal, James Taylor quietly changed the game in 1970 with Fire and Rain. Gentle, acoustic, and deeply personal, it marked the rise of the singer-songwriter movement. Taylor wrote the song about his struggles with depression, addiction, and the suicide of a close friend. Every line is a raw confession, delivered in his warm, intimate voice. I've seen fire and I've seen rain wasn't poetry for its own sake. It was a lived experience. The contrast between Taylor's soft guitar and the heaviness of his words struck listeners deeply. In an era of stadium-sized anthems, here was a song that spoke directly to your soul. It became a defining moment not just for Taylor, but for an entire new wave of confessional songwriting that would dominate the decade. Number 7. Who'll Stop the Rain, Creedence Clearwater Revival. If Woodstock was the dream, Who'll Stop the Rain was the hangover. John Fogerty wrote the song after playing the festival in 1969, watching the chaos of mud, exhaustion, and disillusionment. By 1970, when it was released on Cosmo's Factory, it felt like the perfect anthem for a generation that had seen its ideals clash with reality. The song's lyrics are deceptively simple, but powerful. Long as I remember, the rain's been coming down. It was about more than just weather. It was about Vietnam, political lies, and the endless storms of history. Musically, it was classic CCR, straightforward, melodic, unforgettable. But emotionally, it was a sigh, a weary acknowledgement that the peace and love dream of the 60s hadn't stopped the rain. It remains one of Fogerty's most hauntingly timeless works.
I took her home to my place.
Number 8. All Right Now, Free. Sometimes lightning strikes in a rehearsal room. After a bad gig where the audience seemed bored, Free's bassist Andy Fraser and vocalist Paul Rodgers decided they needed a song that would wake people up. They sat down and in 10 minutes wrote All Right Now. Released in 1970, the song's simple riff and chorus made it instantly anthemic. It was blues rock stripped to its essence, raw guitar, pounding drums, and Rodgers' soulful voice. The track became a staple of classic rock radio and a stadium sing-along for decades. Though Free never achieved the long-term success of Zeppelin or Sabbath, All Right Now ensured their place in rock history. It proved that sometimes simplicity is the greatest power of all.
Hear the drumming for dead in Ohio. Gotta get down to it.
Number 9. Ohio, Crosby, Stills, Nash, and Young. On May 4, 1970, 4 students were shot and killed by the National Guard at Kent State University during an anti-war protest. Within weeks, Neil Young had written Ohio, and Crosby, Stills, Nash, and Young had recorded and released it. It was one of the most urgent protest songs ever put to tape. Young's furious lyrics, "Tin soldiers and Nixon coming, we're finally on our own," captured the anger and grief of a generation. Unlike the dreamy optimism of earlier protest music, Ohio was raw, immediate, and impossible to ignore. The song was banned on some radio stations, but it spread anyway, becoming a rallying cry for the anti-war movement. Few songs in rock history have ever been so directly tied to a moment of national trauma. Ohio wasn't just a song, it was history set to music. Number 10. The Man Who Sold the World, David Bowie. In 1970, David Bowie was still a rising star, searching for the persona that would make him immortal. On The Man Who Sold the World, he delivered one of his first masterpieces. The title track was eerie, cryptic, and unlike anything else in rock at the time. With its unsettling lyrics about identity and alienation, The Man Who Sold the World didn't chart or make a splash at the time, but it planted the seeds of the Bowie we'd soon see in the 70s. Theatrical, enigmatic, otherworldly. The song would gain new life decades later when Nirvana covered it on their MTV Unplugged session in 1993, introducing a new generation to its haunting beauty. In 1970, it was a whisper of the future, proof that Bowie was about to change everything.
Good enough for me. Good enough for me and my Bobby McGee.
Number 11. Me and Bobby McGee, Janis Joplin. When Janis Joplin walked into the studio to record Me and Bobby McGee, no one knew it would be her last great performance. Written by Chris Christopherson and Fred Foster, the song was a mix of country storytelling and soulful delivery. In Janis's hands, it became transcendent. Her voice cracked, soared, and bled with emotion as she sang about freedom, love, and loss. Just weeks after recording it, she was gone, dead at 27. The track was released posthumously in 1971 and became her only #1 single. Hearing Me and Bobby McGee today is like hearing Janis herself reach out from the past. It's joyful and heartbreaking all at once, the last echo of a voice that burned too bright and too fast. Number 12. Voodoo Child, Slight Return, Jimi Hendrix. If Janis was one of the voices of her era, Jimi Hendrix was its guitar god. And in 1970, he played his final notes on Voodoo Child, Slight Return. With its wah-wah-drenched riff and volcanic solos, the track was Hendrix at his most electrifying. It sounded less like a song and more like a force of nature unleashed. Hendrix turned the guitar into something beyond an instrument, a weapon, a prayer, a scream. When he died in September 1970 at just 27 years old, Voodoo Child became a farewell. It wasn't meant to be his last anthem, but fate made it so. More than 50 years later, it still feels like the guitar itself is grieving his loss. Number 13. Black Magic Woman, Santana. Not many bands could take someone else's song and completely own it, but that's exactly what Santana did with Black Magic Woman. Originally written by Fleetwood Mac's Peter Green, Santana reimagined it in 1970 with Latin rhythms, swirling organ, and Carlos Santana's searing guitar. The result was pure magic. It climbed the charts and introduced mainstream audiences to a fusion of rock and Latin influences that felt fresh and exciting. Santana's guitar tone was unmistakable, fluid, emotional, and fiery. Black Magic Woman wasn't just a cover, it was a transformation, proof that rock was no longer bound by borders or genres. Carlos Santana opened the door for new sounds and cultures to flow into rock's bloodstream. Number 14, Mama Told Me Not to Come, Three Dog Night. 1970 wasn't all heavy riffs and heartbreak. Three Dog Night brought humor and groove to the charts with Mama Told Me Not to Come. Written by Randy Newman. As a satirical take on a wild party, the band turned it into a funky, swaggering hit. With its playful delivery and driving rhythm, the song shot to #1 in the US. It showed that rock could laugh at itself even in a turbulent time. Not every song had to carry the weight of the world. Sometimes, music was about having fun, even if your mama told you not to. Number 15. Signed, Sealed, Delivered, I'm Yours, Stevie Wonder. At just 20 years old, Stevie Wonder released Signed, Sealed, Delivered, I'm Yours, Yours, and the future of popular music shifted. With its joyous energy, irresistible groove, and Stevie's powerful vocals, the song transcended genre. It was soul, it was pop, it was rock, and it was a hit. The track marked a turning point for Stevie, who took greater creative control of his music. It was a glimpse of the genius that would soon give us Talking Book, Inner Visions, and Songs in the Key of Life. Though not strictly rock, its crossover appeal made it a fixture on rock radio, bridging audiences and hinting at the decade of innovation to come. Stevie wasn't just delivering a song, he was delivering the future. 1970 was a year of endings. The Beatles said goodbye. Hendrix and Joplin were gone. The optimism of the 60s was shattered, but from that wreckage came rebirth. Black Sabbath gave us metal, Bowie gave us mystery, Santana gave us fusion, Zeppelin gave us thunder, CCR, CSNY, and others gave us protest anthems that still echo today. Rock didn't die in 1970. It transformed, it adapted. It rose from the ashes, stronger, louder, and ready to define a new decade. And more than 50 years later, we still feel the shockwaves of that rebirth every time we press play.